Right now, there's a champion in League of Legends who isn't just strong, she's dangerous. She can literally crash your game, and not just yours, but the entire lobbies just by pressing W at the right time. This same champion is removing games from match history, turning fights into unkillable stalemates, and making highlight clips look more like cheat codes than competitive play. You're probably wondering, what kind of champion could do all these? Well, her name is Mel, the Soul's Reflection, Riot's shiny new mage/support hybrid who arrived with all the hype in the world. She was supposed to be clever, reactive, and rewarding. A champion who could turn your own power back at you. Instead, she's turned pro matches into a game of Russian roulette. Because right now, Mel is banned across multiple pro leagues. Not because she's statistically the strongest, but because one bug tied her most unique ability can literally break the game. In this video, we're going to cover exactly how Mel went from the stage-ready face of a new season to the champion tournament officials won't even let in the draft lobby. We'll break down her kit, the tech nightmare behind her design, the bugs that forced Riot's hand, and the bigger question her story raises about the future of champion complexity in League. This is how Mel broke League of Legends. Mel isn't some legacy rework or forgotten Season 2 relic. She's brand new, fresh out of the Riot hype machine, and she was meant to be a showstopper. Officially released on January 23rd, 2025, Mel, the Soul's Reflection, came with an Arcane tie-in, somatic teasers, a free unlock event, and a skill set designed to make her feel unlike anything else on the Rift. Riot's own promos pitched her as a mirror champion, part support, part mage, able to redirect her enemy's power and punish them with it. In terms of personality and lore, she's got the polished Noxian elegance of someone who belongs in both a royal court and a war council. Her in-game fantasy is simple to explain, but hard to pull off. Catch your opponent's best move and send it right back. She's reactive, she's flashy, and in theory, she's all about outsmarting your lane opponent instead of just overpowering them. On release, she fit neatly into League's thinking player archetype, those champions like Yasuo, Thresh, or Sett, who reward timing and awareness as much as raw mechanics. You don't just lock Mel in and autopilot, you're supposed to anticipate, bait, and then turn the tables. That was the plan, but buried inside her kit was one spell, one marquee mechanic that would push the game's spaghetti code to its limit. Riot gave her a tool so complex, so deeply wired into how League works under the hood, that it would end up doing more than turn fights. It would turn the game upside down. Before we get into the bugs, the bans, and the absolute chaos, you need to understand what Mel actually does. Because the truth is, every broken moment we're about to talk about, it all comes from a kit that, on paper, makes perfect sense. Let's start with her passive ability, Overwhelm. This is Mel's core mechanic. Every basic attack and damaging ability applies stacks that store some of the damage dealt. Once that stored damage is greater than the target's remaining health after resistances, Mel executes them instantly. Think of it like a pressure gauge on a boiler. You keep building it up, and when it passes a limit, boom, they're gone. On top of that, casting an ability charges her next basic attack with extra projectiles, up to 9 little shards that help stack Overwhelm even faster. Now to Mel's Q, Radiant Volley. This is her bread and butter poke. Mel fires a spread of bolts in an arc, tagging multiple enemies and laying down overwhelmed stacks like confetti. It's a great lane harness tool, but more importantly, it sets up her execute threat for later. For her W, she uses Rebuttal. Now, this is her signature move. Mel raises her barrier, gains a burst of movement speed, and reflects the incoming projectile. It's not a block like Yasuo's Wind Wall, it's a full reverse card. The projectile is caught mid-flight, rebuilt by the game, and sent screaming back to its sender, now dealing damage as if Mel herself had cast it. Sounds clean, right? Well, in reality, it's an engineering nightmare.
Oh, she blocked it with her E.
Now, for Mel's E, we've got the Solar Snare, which is basically a floating orb that slows enemies near it, and if you're unlucky enough to stand dead center when it detonates, it roots you in place. Perfect setup for her ultimate. And for her R, she uses Golden Eclipse. This is Mel's showstopper. All enemies with overwhelm marks get struck at once, anywhere on the map, and the execute threshold gets even higher. You can be halfway across the rift. If she's tagged you, you're still in danger. This whole kit works together to make Mel feel like a predator waiting for you to make the first move. But that W? That's the one that would take her from the highlight reel material to competitive nightmare.
Double kill. An enemy has been slain.
Nice.
On the surface, Mel's W, Rebuttal, looks like a simple press button send projectile back trick. But under the hood, it's one of the most technically complicated abilities Riot has ever built into League of Legends. Riot's own engineers have compared its complexity to Sylas stealing ultimates or Viego possessing enemy champions, both of which have been responsible for some of the most infamous bug chains in the game's history. The reason is simple. Rebuttal doesn't just block an ability like Yasuo's Wind Wall or Samira's Blade. It intercepts a projectile mid-flight, rewrites the ownership and targeting data, and then reinserts that projectile into the game as if Mel had been the one to cast it from the start. In other words, League has to believe that the spell now belongs to her. That means the game has to handle everything. Simple linear skill shots like Ezreal's Q, targeted nukes like Caitlyn's Ace in the Hole, curved and guided missiles like Yumi's Q or Diana's Crescent Blade, chain spells like Ryze's E, and even bizarre cases like Qiyana's R when it collides with terrain. And all of this has to happen in real time without breaking the hundreds of other systems running under League's hood. Things like damage credit, vision reveal, crowd control effects, and item interactions. Every one of those is a potential breakpoint. So when Riot shipped Mel with this mechanic, they weren't just giving players a flashy counterplay tool. They were essentially strapping a high-powered engine onto the game's already complex codebase and hoping all the gears meshed perfectly. The problem? League's spaghetti code is infamous, and the second one tooth on that gear slipped, the whole machine started spitting out chaos. And that chaos didn't stay in theory. Within weeks of release, players began discovering interactions so wild, so game-breaking, that it wasn't just a balance issue anymore. It was a threat to the integrity of entire matches. When Mel hit live servers, it didn't take long for her W to start making headlines, and not the outplay montage kind Riot was hoping for. What players found instead were interactions so absurd, they felt like something out of a custom mod, only these were happening in ranked games and on the pro stage. And they all traced back to the same problem. The more complicated the incoming projectile, the greater the chance that Rebuttal would send it back with something extra. Or something missing entirely. The first big one to break containment was the Ryze disconnect bug. This wasn't just a haha funny bug moment, it was a full-on game killer. If Ryze marked Mel with his E, then fired his Q while that mark was active, and Mel timed her W just right, the reflected spell would loop the game's internal logic into overdrive. Instead of processing the reflection cleanly, the server would lock up, boot every player from the lobby, and in some cases, erase the match from history entirely. Imagine prepping for a playoff game and losing the entire VOD because your mid laner's projectile physics decided to commit digital arson. Then came the Ocean Drake and Ocean Soul sustain bug. In certain scenarios, a reflected projectile interacting with the terrain or soul effect would cause healing procs to trigger in ways Riot never intended. The result of these? Mel's team could suddenly look like an immortal raid boss party, shrugging off burst damage with wave after wave of healing. In pro play, where a single fight can decide the series, this wasn't just frustrating, it was match-breaking. There were also the now infamous 100% HP executes caught on video by bug hunters like Vanderol. Thanks to some nasty edge cases with overwhelm and reflected projectiles, Mel could appear to delete a full health enemy instantly, the game calculating stored damage incorrectly and jump straight to the execution threshold. The victim wouldn't even see their health bar drop, they just vanish. And these weren't isolated incidents. Ashe's Hawkshot would sometimes carry its vision in ways it wasn't meant to after being reflected. Jin's E-Trap could trigger odd sounds and visual glitches when bounced back. Heimerdinger's rockets might split in the wrong direction. Miss Fortune's bullet time could return in the form of phantom waves. Every patch seemed to fix one, only for another to crawl out of the woodwork. In a normal solo queue game, bugs like these might be rare enough to laugh off. But in a competitive match with money, points, and reputations on the line, even a 1% chance is too much. And that's when tournament organizers stepped in. In solo queue, a bug champion is annoying. In pro play, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Competitive League is built on the idea that both teams play under the exact same rules, on the exact same map, with no outside variables deciding the outcome. And when a champion can randomly crash a game, erase match data, or turn a losing fight into an unkillable brawl, that principle goes out the window. By late July, the decision was made. In patch 25.15, multiple leagues, including the Prime League in Europe, issued formal rules stating Mel was disabled in all competitions. It wasn't a balanced decision. It wasn't about her win rate, it was about competitive integrity. You simply can't run the risk of a playoff match ending in a server crash because your mid laner wanted a style on a Ryze. The decision to disable Mel wasn't just for one match day. Because leagues often lock to a patch for the duration of a week or more, Mel's absence stretched over multiple game days, meaning teams had to adjust their draft plans, scrap pocket picks they'd been practicing, and in some cases, rework entire strategies built around their kit. Even for teams that never intended to play Mel, her removal had ripple effects. Threats in the draft shape how opponents prepare, and suddenly one of the season's newest, flashiest picks was off the board entirely. And while the pro scene was dealing with rules and schedules, Riot's engineers were facing a different kind of challenge. How do you fix a champion whose defining mechanic touches almost every system in the game without breaking everything else in the process? The moment Mel's bug hit the spotlight, Riot did what Riot always does. Triage first, long-term surgery later. Hotfixes started rolling out within weeks of her release. Small, targeted patches that aimed to put out the most visible fires. Ashe's Hawkshot no longer carried unintended vision when reflected. Jin's E-Trap stopped producing ghostly sound effects after a bounce. Heimerdinger's rockets had their split logic corrected. Each fix was a headline in the patch notes, a signal that the team was listening. But there was a problem. Every time Riot patched one bug, another would pop up. Not because the fixes were sloppy, but because Rebuttal's code path was so wide. The ability touch damage calculation, vision systems, projectile physics, item passes, crowd control, and even environmental effects like dragon terrain. A tweak in one area could ripple into 3 others. Riot's own dev blog, published in June, didn't sugarcoat it. They admitted Rebuttal was one of the most complex champion abilities we've ever implemented, putting it in the same league as Sylas's hijacked ultimates or Viego's full champion possession mechanic. And like those champions, the complexity made it fertile ground for rare but catastrophic failures. Internally, Riot ran mass testing. Over 180 different abilities were thrown at Rebuttal in controlled environments. Most worked fine, a few didn't, and that was enough. In pro play, almost always works still isn't safe enough to put her back on stage. So the cycle continued. Identify a bug, fix it, and watch the community discover a new interaction in live games. Each time the patch notes read, "Fixed a bug with Mel's W," players would half joke, "See you next week." It was bug whack-a-mole at a global scale, and so far, the mole was winning. Mel might feel like a one-of-a-kind disaster, but in League's long history, she's really just the latest recruit in a very exclusive club of champions whose very design puts them on a collision course with the game's code. We've seen this before. Sylas launched with the power to steal any ultimate in the game, which meant Riot had to make sure his hijacked version worked correctly with over 160 unique kits. For months, every patch seemed to fix a new Sylas bug that had ever existed before, and plenty that weren't even his fault. Then there was Viego, whose possession mechanic literally let him become another champion mid-game, item build and all. That meant every interaction had to account for Viego as any champion, a nightmare for programmers. He was disabled multiple times in competitive play because of strange edge cases, from crashing lobbies to duplicating items. Even Nico, who can disguise herself as allies and minions, found ways to break visual clarity and create bizarre targeting bugs, some of which forced emergency fixes right before tournaments. And if you go back far enough, there's the Grandmaster of Too Strong for the Code, Old Evelyn's Permanent Stealth, which was eventually deemed so impossible to balance that Riot over-nerfed her into irrelevance until a full rework could be built. Mel's W, Rebuttal, belongs in that same lineage. It's the kind of mechanic that forces League's engine to do things it was never originally built to do, and every new champion in this category becomes a live experiment in pushing the boundaries of what's possible and what's stable.
Example, if Veigar uses his ult on you and you reflect it, it goes back to him, even if he moved. And for non-targeted abilities, so skill shots like Lux's Q, they are shot back in the direction they were coming from. They will also keep passive effects, so they will work the same way they would while casted normally, so Jinx's ult will still do more damage the further it goes, for example.
If you've spent any time in solo queue since Mel's release, you already know the 2 reactions she triggers: excitement and dread. For the player who locks her in, there's this electric sense of possibility. Every lane trade could turn into a clip. Every flashy reflection is a chance to humiliate your opponent. And Rebuttal works perfectly. It feels like pure justice, sending Ezreal Q or Caitlyn ultimate screaming right back into their health bar. But on the other side of the rift, the vibe is completely different. Facing Mel feels like playing chess against someone who can pick up your pieces and throw them back at you. You're second guessing every projectile you fire. You hesitate on your skill shots, worried that a mistimed poke could be the opening she needs. And then there are the bug moments. Maybe you watch your health bar evaporate at full HP because Overwhelm decided to play Executioner early. Maybe the Ocean Soul sustained glitch turns a lost fight into a 10-second montage of her team soaking up your damage like it's nothing. Or maybe, and this is one that really gets under people's skin, the game just freezes, everyone drops, and you come back to find the match never happened. By now, players have learned to expect the unexpected. Mel isn't just a champion, she's a coin flip. Will she be the hero who pulls off the sickest turnaround of the game, or the wild card that breaks it entirely? In solo queue, you roll those dice. In pro play, nobody's gambling.
Nice splash. Pretty juke. Play like shit, I don't know what I was chasing. Oh, cut the vision! Shoot me? Shoot me! Oh,
Mel's story is more than just one champion with a buggy ability. It's a spotlight on a bigger tension that's been brewing in League of Legends for years. Riot is constantly trying to make champions that feel fresh, unique, and skill expressive. But the more ambitious the design, the more moving parts it adds to the game's already fragile ecosystem. And in League, every moving part is connected to something else. When Rebuttal works, it's magic. It delivers exactly what Riot promised, a reactive, highlighted reel tool that rewards quick thinking and perfect timing. But when it doesn't, it's not just a bad ability, it's a destabilizing force. It can corrupt match integrity, undermine competitive fairness, and even crash the very stage the game is played on. In solo queue, players will often put up with bugs if the champion is fun enough or strong enough. In pro play, there's no such tolerance. A 1% failure rate is still too high when careers, prize pools, and championship points are on the line. That's why pros can't pick her until Riot is certain she's safe. Not safe enough most of the time, but absolutely reliable every time she's on the Rift. This raises a bigger question. How far should Riot go when it comes to pushing the boundaries of champion design? Should there be a line where mechanical ambition takes a backseat to long-term stability? Or is breaking the game's limits worth the risk, even if it means a few disasters along the way? Right now, Mel is both proof of what's possible when Riot swings for the fences, and a reminder of what can happen when the ball sails over and smashes straight through a window. Mel's title is the Soul's Reflection, and right now, she's living up to it, just not in the way Riot intended. She's reflecting something back at the game itself, a mirror held up to the challenges of making League feel new without breaking what makes it work. She was meant to be clever, stylish, and satisfying, a champion who could turn your best move into your worst mistake. And in her best moments, she delivers that fantasy perfectly, but she also delivers something else, a reminder that the more ambitious the design, the more fragile the foundation can become. For now, Mel sits on the sidelines of pro play, her kit polished in theory, but unpredictable in practice. She'll either return as a shining example of Riot's engineering triumphs, or be remembered as another what could have been story filed alongside other champions who flew too close to the sun. Until then, she remains exactly what her name suggests, a reflection. One part brilliance, one part chaos, and entirely unforgettable. And there you have it. If you enjoyed our breakdown of the champion Mel, and if you learned something new, you should click on the other video on your screen right now. Thanks for watching Admiral Ace, and until next time, keep acing, gamers.